Someone you love is going to die. You already know this. And when it happens, you will do something strange. You will dress the body. You will gather people together. You will say words over the ground before lowering them into it. You will bring flowers that will wilt in 2 days. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you might wonder, why? Why do any of this? The person's gone. But the real answer to that question is far stranger than you think. Because those rituals you were performing, your ancestors were performing versions of them long before language existed, long before cities, long before anything we would recognize as civilization. And what that tells us about the human brain is something most people never stop to consider. Start with a body, a real one. 100,000 years ago, somewhere on the African continent, a person dies. They are part of a small group, maybe 20, maybe 30 individuals. They have no written language, no formal religion, no priest, no church, no burial code handed down through generations. And yet the group does not simply leave the body and move on. They stop. They do something with it. Researchers examining sites like Kafze Cave in Israel found deliberate burials dating back at least 92,000 years. The bodies were not just placed, they were positioned, hands arranged, objects included. Ochre or red pigment stained the bones. This was not accident. This was intention. Paul Pettit, a paleoanthropologist at Durham University who has spent decades studying mortuary behavior in ancient populations, argues that the impulse to treat the dead with ceremony is one of the oldest and most consistent behaviors in the human fossil record. It shows up independently across cultures, across continents, across tens of thousands of years of separation. That pattern is not coincidence. That pattern is biology. Here's what your brain is actually doing when someone dies. There is a region in the brain, the posterior superior temporal sulcus, that is specialized for tracking other people. It builds a model of every person you know, their face, their voice, their habits, where they sit at dinner, how they laugh. That model does not simply switch off when a person dies. The brain built it over years. It keeps running. You hear a song and expect to share it with them. You reach for your phone to call them before you remember. You set the table and almost put out their plate. This is not a flaw. This is the brain doing exactly what it was designed to do. Maintain social models that kept your ancestors alive in small interdependent groups where every individual mattered. What your ancestors discovered, not through philosophy, but through raw survival, is that you need a ritual to close the loop. You need a moment that the brain can use as a marker, an endpoint, something the nervous system can file as this chapter is finished. Without it, the model keeps running. And a brain running a model of someone who will never return is a brain in a state of low-grade crisis. The rituals that evolved across human cultures are remarkably consistent in their structure, even when their surface details differ wildly. A moment of gathering, a physical act performed on or near the body, words spoken aloud, a period of collective mourning, then a return to ordinary life marked by some kind of transition, a meal, a fire, a specific number of days. Anthropologist Robert Hertz, writing in the early 20th century, documented this pattern across cultures so geographically separated that contact between them was impossible. He called it secondary burial, the idea that the social death and the biological death are two different events, and that ritual exists to bring them into alignment. Your ancestors understood this before they had words for it, before they could have explained it to you. They understood it the way you understand how to breathe, not through thought, but through necessity. Now go further back, not 90,000 years, further, to the Neanderthals. For a long time, scientists assumed that ritual behavior around death was exclusively a modern human trait, proof of cognitive sophistication that our evolutionary cousins lacked. Then the evidence started piling up at sites like Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq, where archaeologist Ralph Selecki excavated a Neanderthal burial in the 1950s and found dense concentrations of pollen round the remains, suggesting flowers had been placed with the body. The interpretation remains debated, but at other sites the pattern holds. Neanderthals positioned their dead. They covered them. Some sites show repeated use of specific locations, suggesting the same spot was returned to across generations. If that is not a form of memory, a form of honoring, then what is? This matters because it tells you that the impulse is not something modern humans invented. It is something that may have existed in the human lineage for now. This matters because it tells you that the impulse is not something modern humans invented. It is something that may have existed in the human lineage for hundreds of thousands of years, possibly predating the split between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals entirely. The ritual is not cultural, it is ancestral. So why flowers? Why red ochre? Why positioning the body to face east or toward the river, or with the knees drawn up? These details vary, but they all solve the same problem. They convert a biological event, the stopping of a heart, into a social event that the community can process together. The flowers will wilt, the red ochre will fade, but the act of placing them says, this person was here, this person mattered, and we are marking that. The marking is the message, and the message is received not by the dead but by the living. David Kessler, who co-wrote with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and has since expanded her original 5 stages of grief, has argued that the rituals we perform are not for the person who died. They are for the survivors. They are neurological scaffolding. They give the grieving brain a sequence to follow when its normal orientation toward the person who's gone has nowhere left to go. The brain needs a script. Ancient humans gave it one, and the script has barely changed. Think about what happens at a funeral today. People travel from far away. They gather in one place at a specific time. There's a sequence of events, a greeting, a ceremony, a moment of communal expression, often food afterward. The body is treated with care, dressed, made to look as much like the living person as possible. Objects are sometimes buried or burned, words are spoken, then people leave, the gathering disperses. Life resumes, but slightly changed. That structure, gathering, ceremony, communal expression, dispersal, resumption, is ancient. It did not come from religion, though religion has shaped it. It came from the human nervous system, trying to survive loss in a world where loss meant danger. Because here's something your ancestors understood that modern culture often obscures. In a group of 20 or 30 people, one death is enormous. It is not a statistic. It is the loss of a hunter, a mother, a memory keeper, someone who knew where the water was in summer, where the predators denned in winter. The death of one person destabilized the entire group, and so the group could not afford to let the grieving individual spiral alone. They gathered, they performed, they moved through the loss together because together was the only way to survive it. You still feel this. You feel it at every funeral you have attended, the strange comfort of other people in the room, the way being around others who knew the person makes the loss feel held rather than crushing. That comfort's not a product of civilization. It is the same neurological response your ancestors relied on 200,000 years ago. You are the beneficiary of a system so old that you cannot remember learning it, because you never did. It was already in you. And then there is the question of what happens after. The afterlife. Heaven, Valhalla, the dream time, the land of the ancestors, the cycle of rebirth. Every culture on earth has one, and not because every culture received the same religious instruction, but because every human brain that has ever modeled another person has faced the same unbearable problem. The model keeps running even after the person stops. The idea that the person continues somewhere in some form is not a theological claim made by priests. It is a neurological demand made by a brain that cannot simply delete the people it loves. The ceremony does not resolve this, but it acknowledges it. And that acknowledgement, the gathering, the words, the earth moved, the flowers wilted on a grave, is something you share with every human being who has ever lived. Every one of them has stood where you have stood or will stand. Every one of them has watched someone they loved become past tense. And every one of them reached for the same ancient tool, the ritual. So the next time you stand at a graveside or light a candle or set a place at a table for someone who will never fill it again, You are not doing something your culture invented. You are doing something your species discovered in the long dark before history. You're closing the loop the only way the human brain knows how. You're marking the moment. You are saying this person was here. And the impulse to say it is exactly as old as the impulse to love someone in the first place. Tonight, someone somewhere will perform this ritual for the first time. They will not know why it helps, but it will, because it always has.